Hello, welcome back to the channel, you guys. Today we're going to be working on a worksheet change function. If you guys are new to the channel, I started a series VBA in 5 minutes where we learn a small piece of VBA functionality that we can try to implement into either our everyday jobs, our freelancing career like myself, or just if we want to learn something. So we're going to work on worksheet change functions. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So we have a column A, which is the status, okay, pending, open, closed, waiting, and we have a date column. Now what we want to do is when the status of a record changes, we want to date and timestamp when that record changed. So if you have a log of tasks that you're working on and you change the status and you need to know when that status was changed, this is a great way to do it automatically instead of having to remember to enter in that date or time. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're working with is, again, a worksheet change function. So we're actually going to be putting our VBA into the sheet itself as opposed to a module itself. So here we're going to right click on our sheet 1. We're going to say view code. That's going to bring up our code window here. And I'm going to split the screen so you guys can see both the code and the worksheet. So as you'll see, we're inside of sheet 1, okay? So inside of our code, where normally sometimes we would insert a module and write our code in here. We want to insert this code into the sheet itself because we're going to be tracking when something changes. We want something to happen. Let me change my size of font here so you guys can see better. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this up. So we start this by saying private sub, and it's going to be called worksheet change. And what we're wanting to pass in there is called a target. So our target is the actual cell value that we're working with. Target as range, so we're going to define it as a range. All right. First thing we need to do is actually set the range to whatever we're working with. So we're going to say set range RNG being our variable. Set range equals intersect. So where we are intersecting, where we are actually working. Our target value, which is the cell we're working with, me.columns, and we're working in column A. So we only want this thing to trigger when something happens in column A, all right? Next thing we're gonna do is check if we are in fact in column A when we're working. So we're gonna say if it's not in the range, if not is nothing, then so if range is nothing, meaning if range is column A, then do what? Well, first thing we want to do is turn off what's called enable events. Enable events is basically the mastermind behind the work of checking if a worksheet is changing in some way. And so we want to turn that off because if we were to happen like to be looping, for example, and things are changing, we could get stuck in an infinite loop and our workbook could crash. So after we've determined we are in the cell that we want to be in, or in the column A that we want to be in, we want to turn off that functionality just for a minute, all right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to loop through our range. So we're going to say for each cell in our range, which is the cell that we're working in, our target value, for each cell in range, we want to check if the cell value does not equal blank, then what do we want to do? Well, as we mentioned, we want to enter the date and the time in the column to the right of it. So we're going to say cell.offset, which basically shifts, and we can offset either up, down, left, or right by row or by column. We're going to shift down 0 rows, but we're going to shift over 1 column. So .value equals now. We need to end our if statement just like we always do. And we need to say next cell for our for loop, okay? So after we are done, so we've completed the part that will actually execute the script to enter the date and the time in the column to the right. So now what we wanna do is re-enable our events. So we wanna say application.enable events equals true. So we have now, and then the next thing we need to do is end our if statement for this if statement. So let me go ahead and show you this in action real quick, and then I'll walk through it again real quick just so you guys can have a better understanding. So now when we change our status here to pending, bam, you'll see our date and time gets entered in there. Open, bam, it gets entered into there. Now, let's say after the next minute tick, so 16:06, if we were to change this status to closed, we would see 1606, all right? So that's it, that's how this works. So let me walk through this again one more time. Private sub worksheet changed lives inside of our sheet because we're capturing an event, all right? We're setting our range to be something happening in column A. Something that happens in column A, that's what we want to capture, okay? This line, if not range is nothing, means if it happens outside of A, we don't want anything to happen. We don't want any code to be executed. We only want to execute code when it's in column A, okay? We're going to loop through all the cells that we've selected. So if we've selected multiple of these and we change the value of all of these at one time, it will execute this code to set the date and time in column B, all right? So we're looping through each one of those selections that we've made. If the cell value is not blank, so if we actually have a status, we are going to offset. So we're going to move over one column and set the value to now, which is the date and time. And then we're going to loop to our next cell if we have multiple cells that we're updating. And then we're going to re-enable our events after we are done working. And that's it. So now that we're at 1606, so if I change this to waiting, you'll see this 1605 update to 1606. And there we go. So if you guys learned something today, please like, smash that subscribe button. It goes a very long way. I love providing these videos to you guys. I hope you guys are gaining some knowledge from this. If you guys have something you want me to teach you, please enter that in the comment section below. I would love to cover that in more detail. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.